Show more 200 p.m. Hi friends. I want to start today with a question. Not a question that I want you to answer out loud. Not a question I want you to think about for a second and move on. I want you to sit with this question. I want you to feel it in your chest. I want it to make you a little uncomfortable. Because the truth is, the most important questions in life are always a little uncomfortable. Here it is. If nothing changes about the way you live your daily life, if you wake up tomorrow exactly the same way you woke up today, if you spend your hours the same way, if you react to people the same way, if you eat the same things, think the same thoughts, avoid the same fears, where will you be 1 year from now? Take a moment. Really think about it. Because most people in this world are living in a loop, and they don't even know it. They wake up, they go through the day on autopilot, they fall asleep exhausted, and they tell themselves, "Not tomorrow I'll change, tomorrow I'll start, tomorrow will be different." And then tomorrow comes, and it looks exactly like today, and then the weeks blur together, and the months fly by, and before they know it, they're standing at the end of another year, tired, frustrated, maybe a little bitter, asking themselves, how is it possible that nothing changed? I'll tell you how. Because the year never changes anything. The calendar never changes anything. January 1st never changes anything. The new year is just a number. It's just a page turning. It means absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing, unless the person turning that page has decided to be different. Unless the person holding that calendar has decided to live differently. Not just dream differently. Not just hope differently. Live differently. 2026 will change only if your habits change. That's it. That's the whole speech right there. But I'm going to spend the next hour making sure that sentence doesn't just pass through your ears. I'm going to make sure it burns itself into your soul. Because most of you have heard something like this before. You've heard, change your habits, change your life. You've seen it on Instagram, you've watched the videos, you've bought the journals, you've downloaded the apps, and still, you are not where you want to be. So clearly, hearing the words isn't enough. We have to go deeper. We have to go to the place most motivational speeches never go. We have to go to the truth, and the truth is painful. But the truth is also the only thing that ever set anyone free. So let me tell you about a man named David. David grew up in a small apartment with 3 siblings and a mother who worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. His father left when David was 7 years old. Not dramatically, not in a fight. He just didn't come home one day, and David's mother sat him down on the edge of the bed, and she held his hand, and she said, "Your father is going away for a while." And David, being 7, asked, "How long?" And his mother looked at the ceiling for a moment, the way parents do when they're searching for words that don't exist. And she said, "I don't know, baby. I don't know." He never came back. David grew up angry. Not the kind of angry that screams and breaks things. The quiet kind. The kind that sits in your stomach and calcifies over years. The kind that whispers to you at night, "You are not enough. You were not enough for him to stay. You will never be enough for anyone." And David carried that voice with him through school, through college, where he dropped out after 1 semester because the voice got too loud, through his 20s, where he moved from job to job, city to city, relationship to relationship, always running, never knowing what he was running from. By the time David was 32, he was sleeping on his cousin's couch, making $12 an hour and drinking more than he should. And every New Year's Eve, David would make the same promises to himself. This year will be different. This year I'm going to get my act together. This year is going to be my year. And every February, he'd be right back on that couch. Does that sound familiar to anyone? I'm not talking about David anymore, am I? Because the truth is, David is not a specific person. David is a pattern. David is a way of living that millions and millions of people are trapped in right now. Maybe you're not on your cousin's couch. Maybe you're in a beautiful house with a beautiful job and a beautiful life that looks perfect on the outside. But on the inside, there is a version of David living in you too. There is a voice that tells you you're not enough. There is a habit you keep repeating that you swore you'd stop. There is a goal you've been chasing for so long that you've started to wonder if you even deserve to catch it. I see you. I really do. And I want you to understand something. David's problem was not his father leaving. David's father leaving was a wound. But a wound, if it's treated, heals. David's real problem was what the wound became over time. Because David never treated it. David never sat with it, looked at it, and said, "This happened. It hurt me. But it does not define me." Instead, David built his entire life around the wound. He made decisions from the wound. He chose relationships from the wound. He developed habits, the drinking, the running, the self-sabotage, that were all just ways of not having to feel the wound. And here's what I need you to understand about habits. This is the most important thing I will say for the next several minutes, so I need you to lean in. Habits are not just things you do. Habits are stories you tell yourself about who you are. When David reached for a bottle, he wasn't just drinking. He was confirming a story. The story that said, "I am the kind of person who can't handle things. I am the kind of person who needs an escape. I am not strong enough to sit with this feeling." Every time he took a drink, the story got a little louder. Every time he quit a job before it got hard, the story got a little more real. Every time he left a relationship before it got deep, the story became a little more like fact. That's how habits work. They aren't just behaviors. They are identity. They are the daily vote you cast for who you are. And so, the question is not just, how do I change my habits? The question is, who have my habits decided I am? And more importantly, who do I need to become? Because you cannot build a new life on an old identity. I'll say that again. You cannot build a new life on an old identity. You can change your routine all you want. You can wake up at 5 in the morning and drink your lemon water and do your cold plunge and write in your gratitude journal. But if the story underneath all of that still says, "I am someone who doesn't finish things. I am someone who is broken. I am someone who doesn't deserve success," then those routines will last about 3 weeks. And then one hard day will come. One rejection, one failure, one painful moment. And you will go right back to the old habits, because the old habits are congruent with the old story. So before we talk about what to do, we have to talk about who to become. And I want to use David again, because David's story doesn't end on that couch. When David was 34, something happened. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a rock bottom moment, though he'd had plenty of those. It was a Tuesday afternoon. He was sitting in his car, in a parking lot outside a grocery store, and his phone rang. It was his niece. She was 8 years old, and she called to tell him she'd gotten 100% on her spelling test. And she was so proud. Her voice was so bright, so full of this uncomplicated, unafraid joy. And David sat there in that parking lot listening to her talk, and something inside him cracked open. Not broke, cracked open, like light getting through. Because he heard in her voice everything he used to be before life got to him. Before the wound, before the story, and for the first time in a long time, he asked himself not, "Why is my life like this?" but, "What if it didn't have to be?" What if? Two of the most powerful words in the human language. What if? What if I am not the sum of what happened to me? What if I am the sum of what I decide to do next? What if the story isn't over? What if I have been the author the whole time and I just didn't know it? David didn't transform overnight. I want to be very clear about that, because too many motivational speeches give you the impression that one moment of inspiration equals immediate change. It doesn't work that way. One moment of inspiration plants a seed. But seeds need water. Seeds need sunlight. Seeds need consistent, patient tending. And most people give up on the seed before it ever breaks through the soil. David decided to change one thing. Just one. He decided that every morning, before he did anything else, before he checked his phone, before he turned on the TV, before he reached for anything that would distract him from himself, he would sit in silence for 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes. And he would ask himself one question: what is one thing I can do today that the person I want to become would do? That's it. That was the first habit. And some mornings the answer was big. Apply for that job you've been scared to apply for. And some mornings it was small. Make your bed. Wash your dishes. Call your mother. But every single morning he asked the question. And every single day he did the one thing. And slowly, so slowly that he almost didn't notice it, the story started to change. Not because the world changed. The world was exactly the same. His father was still gone. The wounds were still there. The mistakes of his past hadn't been erased. But the daily vote had changed. Every morning that he sat in that silence was a vote that said, "I am someone who shows up for himself." Every time he did the one thing, it was a vote that said, "I am someone who follows through." And those votes accumulated. They compounded. The way compound interest works in finance, slow and invisible at first, and then suddenly dramatic and undeniable. By the end of that year, David had a new job, not a dream job, a better job, one that used more of who he was. He had stopped drinking, not because he forced himself to stop, but because the drinking no longer fit the story he was writing about himself. He had started going to therapy, which was the bravest thing he'd ever done, because sitting with your wounds and actually looking at them is 10 times harder than running from them. And he had started showing up for his niece every week, consistently, because she reminded him of the person he used to be and the person he was becoming, and he didn't want to miss a single moment of watching her grow. Was David's life perfect at the end of that year? No. He still had hard days. He still heard the old voice sometimes. He still made mistakes. But he was no longer the same person. He was different. Not because 2026 arrived, or 2025, or whatever year it was. He was different because he had made a daily, relentless, sometimes difficult decision to be different. He was different because his habits had changed. Now, I want to talk about something that I think is at the root of why so many people struggle to change their habits. And it's something we don't talk about enough. It's something that makes people uncomfortable when I bring it up. But I believe it is the single biggest obstacle standing between most people and the life they want. It's the addiction to comfort. I'm not using the word addiction loosely. I mean it clinically, structurally, neurologically. The human brain is wired, deeply, powerfully wired, to seek comfort and avoid discomfort. This was useful on the savannah 200,000 years ago, when discomfort usually meant a predator was nearby. But in 2026, the predators are mostly gone and the discomfort is mostly internal. It's the discomfort of a difficult conversation, the discomfort of starting something new when you might fail, the discomfort of looking honestly at yourself and saying, "I have been living below my potential and I need to change." The discomfort of putting down the phone, turning off the Netflix, and sitting in the quiet with your own thoughts. And the brain, because it is ancient and stubborn, treats all of these discomforts the same way it would treat a lion. It screams, "Get away from this! Find something comfortable. Find something familiar. Find something that feels good right now." And so we scroll. And we eat things we know we shouldn't. And we watch one more episode. And we say yes to the gathering when we know we should be saying yes to the work. And we choose the conversation that keeps us safe over the conversation that might lead to growth. And we do this not because we are weak or lazy or broken. We do it because we are human, because our brains are doing exactly what they were designed to do. But here's the problem. The life you want lives on the other side of discomfort. It always will. And no app, no journal, no morning routine, no motivational video, including this one, will change that fundamental truth. Growth lives in discomfort. Transformation lives in discomfort. The version of you that you dream of becoming lives in discomfort. So the question is not, how do I avoid discomfort? The question is, how do I change my relationship with discomfort? And the answer, the real answer, is that you have to reframe what discomfort means. Right now, most of us have been trained to interpret discomfort as a signal that says stop, as a warning sign, as a red light, as something to be avoided, numbed, escaped. But what if you could train yourself to read that same signal as a green light? What if, every time you felt the burn of discomfort, instead of hearing stop, you heard, "This is where the growth is." Instead of, "This is dangerous," you heard, "This is exactly where I need to be." This is not a metaphor. This is literally what the most extraordinary people in the world, athletes, entrepreneurs, artists, scientists, leaders, this is literally what they have trained themselves to do. They have reprogrammed the meaning they assign to difficulty. They don't enjoy suffering. They're not masochists, but they have learned to read the feeling of difficulty as confirmation that they are doing the right thing, as evidence that they are on the path, as a signal that something worth having is close. I want to tell you about another person. Her name is Maria.